The financial markets have been flipped upside down. You have seen what chaos this has been over the last few months, but we are about to take another leap. I'm going to show you that today. Let's begin right here. The UN, of all groups, calling on the Fed and other central banks to halt interest rate increases. Why in the world is the United Nations even getting into this? They basically said, you're going to cause a recession, you got to stop right now. The point here is that this is getting so bad and just a small amount in the increases that the United Nations and other supranational entities are saying, oh my goodness, that's the kind of world we live in. Now, this is just one analyst out of so many, but he had a point that I wanted to make, which will set us up for the rest of the video. Even if the Fed were to relent, McCullough says the damage is done. They are too far late now, talking about interest rate increases, quantitative tightening, and so on. Just like it was impossible for them to stop inflation, it's impossible for them to stop the pending U.S. corporate profit recession or the mainline recession. And that's so important to look at the effects of the increasing interest rates, not just mortgage rates and not just other things that we would see as, the average person, but the banking system itself. Then we have this. Mark Cabana, head of U.S. rate strategy at Bank of America. This is one high-level individual, very important person in the financial system, okay? Essentially, what he's saying here is that when push comes to shove, the Federal Reserve is going to pivot. They are going to change policy, and there's no if, ands, or buts, okay? You can read it if you want in his note, but that's basically to summarize it. Bringing down underlying inflation, the inner layer of the inflation onion, will take longer, but with monetary policy helping to restore balance between demand and supply, I see inflation moving closer to our 2% goal in the next few years. This is one member of the Fed. I'll show you another in just a second. Tighter monetary policy has begun to cool demand and reduce inflationary pressures, but our job is not done yet. It will take time. I'm firmly confident, and so on. This is coming at the same time, by the way, that the market said, the Federal Reserve is going to pivot, don't worry about it. Here we have yet another person. What if we are in a new era, one in which we face inflationary headwinds? This is Barkin out of the Fed. History may be less of a precedent for appropriate policy. These pressures could make looking through short-term shocks more difficult. They could make gradual rate increase paths less effective, saying we can't rely on what happened in the past. This is a different scenario, so we have to stay true. So you have two members of the Federal Reserve saying we have to do this, we have to increase interest rates and quantitative tightening, but there are a few other options out there that they may go for, if you can believe it or not. This is Operation Twist. For those who don't know, I'll explain it really quickly. This is one of the options that the Federal Reserve has on the table right now. They're talking about a few decades ago when they first implemented it, what it all meant. The Fed announced a plan to sell short-term treasuries and buy long-term bonds. At the same time, the Treasury reduced its issuance of long-term securities and increased the number of short-term securities, originally referred to as Operation Nudge because of its intended goal of nudging long-term rates lower while maintaining or elevating short-term rates. It was renamed Operation Twist in homage to the song Chubby Checker popularized. So this is one potential option. They could do this, and by the way, it had no effect as far as I'm concerned when they did it initially, in this current cycle that we're in. But this is something that they could do because they want to give the appearance that they're going to take down inflation, but they don't want to actually, do much. They don't want to do that quantitative easing again. They don't want to print several $1 trillion unless they do. Here we have, how does yield curve control work? Well, you can see it for yourself. Yield curve control is something that Japan has done in other countries. Similar to the policy rate, the Fed funds rate, yield curve control aims to control interest rates along some portion of the yield curve. The yield curve is usually defined as the range of yields on Treasury securities from 3-month Treasury bills to 30-year Treasury bonds. This is something we talk about all the time, the yield curve inversion and so on, okay? However, yield curve control targets longer-term rates directly by imposing interest rate caps on particular maturities. And it goes on, okay? So this is what you need to know, that this is potentially something that we could be seeing in the coming days. Let me show you yet another. The Fed will be growing its balance sheet again, but don't call it QE4. This was back in 2019. Do you remember it? That's right. If you were on this channel, you know all about not QE. Yes, that's right. I said not QE, because as soon as September 17, 2019 came around, the Federal Reserve started to increase its balance sheet. Yes, they increased their balance sheet, but according to Jerome Powell, he referred to it as organic increase in the balance sheet. That is literally what he said. He used the word organic, and then they referred to it as a special operation. And this isn't the quantitative easing, though the balance sheet increased faster during this period of time, increased more and faster than the pace we saw in QE 1, 2, and 3. So call it what you want, but the balance sheet expanded, and of course, we saw what happened through that period. Okay, so that is, in fact, what happened in 2019. You saw Operation Twist, and you looked at different policies, yield curve control, all these different things that they could do. They want to make this appear that they're trying to get inflation down while doing some things and shuffling some stuff around to make it all good for the financial markets. But we'll see how it unfolds. Here we have the next aspect. US home prices now posting biggest monthly drops since 2009. Now it's still, all the way up near record highs for many places, but you got to understand what's going on here. As soon as you increase interest rates, you suddenly create a huge problem for all of these different assets. This is just coming out of Black Knight, but they're just showing you that home prices down again in August, with average home nationally now 2% off the June peak. Inventory growth stalls as sellers step back. So we see that at the same time. These are going on basically all over the place for the most part. We have inflationary forces on the other hand, and in particular with commodities that seem to be in high demand these days, like coal. US coal prices climb past $200 as global energy crunch boosts demand. So we see that right now at this time, in which this was one of those things, we don't want coal, we don't ever want to see it again. And now today, the demand is absolutely skyrocketing. So keep an eye on that, because these increases that you're seeing are going to put pressure on the average individual paying their bills. This happens to be one. This letter from the UK energy regulator and dated September 30th involves a rather but important technical change in the UK electricity market. But the key is the first paragraph of the background section highlighted for your perusal. So what does it say? If you look at this, it literally says, as a result, there is a possibility that Great Britain could enter into a gas supply emergency. If I read from the top, due to the war in the Ukraine and gas shortages in Europe, there is a significant risk that gas shortages could occur in the winter 2022-2023 in Great Britain. As a result, could have a gas emergency. What does that mean for you, the individual? You may not have any gas to heat your home. How does that feel? What they are doing right now, what they've done to the people, in my opinion, is unfortunate. At least I'll be nice about it. Europe's energy plan is enough to get through the winter. If you look here, they had a chart that basically shows you a bunch of different countries' state support to shield households and businesses from the energy crisis. This is as a percentage of the GDP. So look how huge this is. For the UK, 6.5% of GDP just for this one thing. That's how big this has become. So when people say that, they're not doing enough, well, they're spending a lot of money, that's for sure. But you can see how, what the reason I want to show you the economic aspects here is that Europe has really got itself into some big trouble. Okay, that's what I'll leave you with there. Then we have this, 194,000 people have pledged to strike. When we reach 1 million, this is apparently, they're not going to pay up on their energy bills if they get to 1 million. Currently, they're quite shy of that, but we'll see what happens. I'm interested to see if they do another strike. This happened before, and they simply will say, we're not going to pay. The Fed pivot, everybody's waiting for it, and we need to talk about it right now today with what options there are, what's happening, and so on. The central banks must calm down inflation by increasing interest rates and reducing money printing. We already know this. The question is how fast that comes through. As a result of the Fed tightening policy, markets are in an absolute fear of the prospect that this is really happening. Could it be? I'm not so sure. We'll look at all of it and how long it goes on for. Yield curve control is one potential option. Of course, at the same time, you have Operation Twist. That's another one. But the most likely factor will be something similar to 2019, September specifically, with the not QE. And why is that? Because it was stealth. Because it didn't really announce anything. Special operation, don't worry, be quiet. This was the repo operations. And they started pumping out money into the system, which was effectively a bailout for the financial companies. And my goodness, did they ever print a lot of money? Could that happen today? Again, it seems like it's possible. So if you found this video informative, I want you to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.